It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. We have a special report from inside Syria, devastated by years of war, now struggling with the aftermath of the earthquake.
The people here are saying this is a real tragedy because it could have been all so different.
In Turkey, the families pushed to poverty by the earthquake demand answers from their government.
President Erdogan, you're live on Sky News. We're broadcasting around the world. What would you like to say to the people who are supporting your country?
The Turkish President meets residents in Adiyman and says he's sorry for not rescuing everyone quickly. Also tonight, the US shoots down an unknown object after it entered airspace over Alaska.
The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight.
Russia ramps up its missile attacks on Ukraine in a sign that the expected offensive is underway. The partner of missing Nicola Bulley pleads for everywhere to be searched as the investigation enters its third week. We are not out of the woods yet. The Chancellor responds after the UK narrowly avoids a recession but fails to grow. The UK joins President Zelensky and more than 30 other countries demanding that Russian and Belarusian athletes are banned from the 2024 Olympics. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. Since the earthquake struck on Monday, getting aid to the people who need it has been crucial. But access into Syria, which has already endured more than a decade of war, is difficult. And only yesterday did we see the first lorries carrying aid cross over the border. Idlib province, a rebel-controlled area of Syria, was one of the areas worst affected by the disaster. The first earthquake of 7.8 magnitude came in the early hours of Monday morning. It was then followed by an aftershock of 7.5 magnitude just hours later to the north. The red area on this map shows the worst affected regions, which extend across central Turkey and Syria, including Idlib province. In a moment, we'll have the latest from the city of Adiyman in Turkey. But first, our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, and her team have travelled across the border to Syria. They're the first international journalists to have reached rebel-held Idlib province since the earthquake. A warning, her report contains images of people who have died in the earthquake.
These were once houses, people's homes. The devastation in Idlib in northwest Syria is immense, and they know all about misery here. They've endured 12 years of war. Now they're fighting to survive a natural disaster, and they're doing it in the awful realization that once again, they're on their own. So they dig through the night. The white helmets, so used to pulling people out of bombed buildings, now trying to sift through rubble to find those who survived the war, only to die trapped and terrified in the earthquake. They've just found the body of a 4-year-old boy still in his pajamas. His father can hardly contain his despair and disgust at how he was left to die alone with no help from outside.
Who is helping us? In Turkey, they're getting everything. They've made a special air bridge to bring aid from all around the world, but no one is coming to help us. What did this child do wrong to stay 4 days underground before we found him?
And the agony's not over yet for him. The white helmets are trying to find his wife and his elder son, who's 10. Both are still missing.
The people here are saying this is a real tragedy because it could have been all so different if they'd been given extra specialist, more sophisticated equipment with which to try and locate these people. Remember, some have already been taken out of here alive, but now the chances of finding anyone else alive are extremely remote.
They're exhausted, but they go on. Few have escaped the agony of loss, either through the war or now the earthquake. They know the importance of finding at least the bodies to grieve and pray over. Have you found anything? No is the constant answer. Even finding the body of a loved one is some small comfort in this part of Syria, where comfort is a scarcity.
I also lost my son. I feel the same sorrow because I lost family too. I know this man is tortured inside. To find his wife and son is a matter of life or death for me.
Two fathers with a bond of suffering binding them together, a common understanding of the agony of losing a precious child. The search goes on all night. The head of the militant rebel group in Idlib turned up to offer support and give a rare interview, and he was blisteringly critical of the world's response.
They're taking too much time, and it's costed lives for those trapped under the rubble. We've lost a lot of lives because of the weak response of the international community. They're the ones responsible.
He was once a member of the terror group Al-Qaeda before forming his own Islamist militant group, now focused on fighting AQ as well as ISIS and the Assad regime in Damascus. He has a $10 million bounty on his head, but he tore into Western leaders for ignoring the needs of civilians in Idlib.
The people who died in the earthquake were not terrorists. They were innocent civilians. They were women and children. So to confuse humanitarian issues with politics is a big problem.
There are only bodies coming over the Turkish-Syria border in any quantity right now. Little meaningful aid has made it across. These are people who have fled the war in Syria to find sanctuary in neighbouring Turkey, now being returned in body bags. It is the saddest of homecomings for their relatives. So they're having to make mass graves in Idlib to cope with the hundreds coming home from across the border, as well as those who've perished here. They simply can't make them quickly enough. They were already struggling with the impact of an unequal war, now more unbearable loss. A final kiss for a newborn baby, a life cut off before it had even really begun. This is a tragedy on top of a grinding war and earthquake calamity. They're talking here of deaths after the quakes caused by poor medical facilities, of the struggle without shelter, of the need for food and water, of the urgency for just about everything. So there is misery upon misery, and the news no one wanted. Salim found his wife and son's bodies, and with that discovery, a whole new depth to his suffering. He's now lost half of his family, 2 sons and their mother. For a child in Idlib, there seems no end to grief. Life for them is all about death. Salim has to somehow console his one surviving daughter, 8-year-old Mace. Calm down, my daughter, he says. Okay, my love? This is God's will. Do you love me? I'll always be with you, he says. They have each other, but that is all. The trauma in Idlib never seems to stop. It just gets worse and worse. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Idlib, Syria.
Well, today, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad made his first public appearance since the earthquakes. He was visiting the war-torn city of Aleppo as the World Food Programme called for more aid to be allowed across the border. He used his visit to criticise the West.
They're saying that the West is prioritising politics over the humanitarian situation, but that's not true. To give priority to one over the other, both situations, the humanitarian and the political, have to exist. In the West, only the political situation exists.
There have now been more than 23,000 deaths in both Turkey and Syria due to the earthquakes. In Turkey, anger is growing. Speaking to Sky News, one resident of the city of Adiyman called the government's response to the disaster neglect and the equivalent of murder. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports from there.
These are the destitute, families pushed into poverty by a 90-second earthquake. Their homes, belongings, loved ones are gone. Now they pick through handouts so their children have clothes. The city of Adiyman has crumbled. Its people are broken. Some here believe the government has blood on its hands. Mother Nature caused this disaster, but, they say, corruption and flimsy building regulations worsened the death toll. It's the result of a great neglect, Juma tells me. In fact, we could call this murder. Today, the president visited the city with promises to rebuild.
We are trying our best not to leave anyone under the rubble. I assure you that we will rebuild in 1 year.
But for some, it's all too late. We meet Baruch by the ruins of his home. He shows us the place where his mother was crushed to death. I ask him his message for the president. I have nothing to say. We were left to our fates in the first hours when maybe we could have been saved, he replies. Baruch has nothing left here. He'd leave the country if he could. Next door, they also cannot wait to go. This wreck could collapse at any moment, burying him under the rubble. But he's determined. Returning with a few belongings, they're leaving for Ankara.
Many people have told us when the earthquake hit, it wiped out any future this city had. At least 70% of the buildings are damaged. There's no running water. Those who can leave are getting out.
For others, that isn't an option. They must find a future in this broken place, try to rebuild a home. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Adiyman, Turkey.
Well, Turkey's President Erdogan met survivors today at a stadium in Adiyman, which has been transformed into a humanitarian hub. Mr. Erdogan said he was so sorry for not being able to help everyone quickly, but promised to rebuild areas within a year. Sky's Kay Burley was in Adiyman when he arrived. She sent this report.
President Erdogan, you're live on Sky News. We're broadcasting around the world. What would you like to say to the people who are supporting your country?
A president under pressure, putting on a brave face meeting survivors. Following criticism, his government has been too slow to act.
Wanted to ask him about the support that has been received from around the world right at this moment, and what more might be needed for the people of southeastern Turkey. All the infrastructure has gone here.
Here in Adiyman, the situation is desperate. 70% of buildings damaged, 30% completely wiped out. For nearly 2 days, they waited for the aid to arrive. President Erdogan conceded help to the worst affected areas was slow for the first day, but now the rescue and recovery operation is in full swing.
I'm so sorry that we cannot rescue everyone as quickly as possible. All the municipalities and mayors are working together with civil NGOs as well. Every citizen of Turkey and our friends from all over the world, we're all trying to stand by the victims of the earthquake.
What's his message to the government?
Yani bir mesaj vermek istiyorum. Bizi yalnız bıraktı. He says I'm afraid to get under jail, get under custody, but I want to say that the government was not helping us enough. We left alone in here.
It's true, aid is starting to arrive. This makeshift refugee centre offers food, water and warm clothing donated by Turkish residents in the north of the country. It's something, but it's not enough, says the former Turkish ambassador to the UK, who's now an opposition MP.
From now on, the international aid should not focus on food or any kind of other issues, but the sustainability of the living conditions there. The living conditions are terrible because there's no natural gas, there's no water, no electricity, and the sewage system has been destroyed.
As the desperate displaced settle uneasily into another freezing night below canvas, countries, including the UK, has sent thermal blankets, medical supplies and a 24/7 field hospital. Erdogan has 3 months until an election. He'll need to rely on significant support from the international community if his 20-year tenure is to continue on after the worst natural disaster here in living memory. Kay Burley, Sky News in Adiyman.
Just want to bring you some breaking news coming into us from Merseyside Police. They're referencing what they're calling a riot in Knowsley. They're saying that they can confirm that officers are in Prescott dealing with 2 groups of protesters this evening, and at around 6:30 a little earlier, officers were facilitating an initially peaceful protest and counter-protest on Ribblers Lane. During the evening, missiles were thrown and damage caused to a police vehicle. There are no injuries that have been reported this time, but additional officers are in the area to deal with the incidents of tonight. They've also implemented a number of road closures on the East Lancs Road and would urge motorists to avoid the area and those in the area to disperse. So that the breaking news coming into us, that Merseyside Police are saying that they have been in attendance at a riot in the Knowsley area of Merseyside. We'll, of course, update you should we get more information on that story. In the meantime, a US fighter jet has shot down an unidentified object flying in airspace over Alaska. President Biden authorised the shooting down of the object, which landed in US territorial waters. The Pentagon gave an update on the object a short time ago.
The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. U.S. Northern Command is beginning recovery operations now. The object was about the size of a small car, so not similar in size or shape to the high-altitude surveillance balloon that was taken down off the coast of South Carolina on February 4.
US correspondent Mark Stone is in Washington, D.C. for us this evening. Any more that you can tell us at all about what actually happened?
Well, this is a very extraordinary development, and there is strikingly little that we are being told about what this object was. Clearly, the US Air Force had good sight of it because they were able to determine that at 40,000 feet it was about the size of a car. But was it a balloon? Was it a drone? Was it manned? Was it unmanned? They think it was unmanned, but don't seem absolutely sure about that. So there's a lot we don't know, and they do not want to draw any links with China. Of course, it's 6 days since a much larger balloon at a higher height was shot down off South Carolina. They are drawing no links with China at the moment here. There has been no contact with the Chinese, which I think is interesting. As for the object itself, well, it's now on water which is frozen north of Alaska. So a recovery operation is underway, we are told, but we don't know how long that will be. So a quite extraordinary development this afternoon. 1:45 was when these 2 fighter jets took to the skies of Alaska and took out this object, but we know strikingly little about what it was.
Mark, thank you very much for that update. The partner of missing Nicola Bulley says he's 100% convinced she did not fall in the river. Friends gathered today to stage a roadside appeal 2 weeks on from her disappearance as police extend the search for the missing mother of two to the Lancashire coast. The 45-year-old went missing while walking her dog in St Michael's-on-Wyre on Friday, the 27th of January, after dropping her daughters off at school. Lisa Dowd reports.
Nicola's friends are not giving up, and neither is her partner Paul. After 2 weeks of searching, he told Channel 5 that the police theory that she fell into the river is wrong.
Personally, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm 100% convinced it's not the river. People don't just vanish into thin air. It's absolutely impossible. So something has happened. Something has happened. Find out what it is. Find out what it is. My plea now is, personally, I want every house, every garage, every outbuilding, the land scrutinised. I want it all searched. I want it all scrutinised. Every piece of it.
Every search has drawn a blank. Police have been scouring the wider parts of the River Wyre, where the water level rises and falls more quickly. But it is the same story. They found nothing in there to lead them to Nicola.
It is perhaps from here that you get a better idea of the scale of the waters these teams are now searching. We are 4 miles from the sea, and within just half an hour, the waters have risen by a couple of metres.
Upstream, friends are determined to keep the flow of information going, again lining the busy main road of St Michael's-on-Wyre, near to the riverside bench where Nicola was last seen.
We still have no evidence, we still don't have that vital bit of information that can give a line of inquiry, and that's why today is so important, to drive that awareness once again that someone must have seen something, and the fact we've got a key piece of road that we have no information for, that's almost what we're clinging on to today, that's going to shed some light on the situation.
As the days and now weeks pass, it does get harder to remain upbeat, but Nicola's friends and family are resolute. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Lancashire.
To the war in Ukraine now, and Russia has launched a wave of missile attacks. Authorities say a number of missiles were shot down over Kiev and Zaporizhia, but damage has been done to the energy infrastructure. Well, it comes as the Ukrainian government is campaigning for fighter jets to bolster its air defences. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, has been speaking to one Ukrainian fighter jet pilot who says they need the proper tools.
Ukraine is keen to show its air force in action. But these ageing jets lack modern weapons. It makes shooting down Russian targets much harder. One pilot took time out from the cockpit to pitch for Western planes, like the American F-16.
You could be a real hero. You can be a very professional pilot, but without the proper tools, without the proper hardware, you can't do anything to increase your capabilities. So you need these proper tools to be really deadly.
But what jets would make a difference? You say Western jets, but which ones?
So F-16 is the best solution exactly right here, right now.
And what about British jets?
Typhoons. It's very capable jet, but at the same time, it's very expensive and it's very limited in number.
On a trip to the UK this week, Ukraine's president urged Britain to give his country jets. But in reality, Rishi Sunak has very little to offer.
I don't think the UK will be sending any jets. The Typhoon is complicated. There is not the full European supply chain as there is for for the F-16. We haven't got that many F-35s, and they cost about 100 million. They cost about 100 million each, and we're already stretched to meet our commitments at the moment.
In a reminder of what's at stake, missiles punched through Ukraine's air defences on Friday. A residential area was damaged in Kyiv, and strikes smashed into energy infrastructure. It's a relentless cycle that Ukraine can't stop alone. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Dnipro.
It's been a challenging time for businesses. High inflation means high costs and low consumer confidence. Add that to a dwindling labour force, and some companies are finding it hard to stay afloat. Today, there was some good news when it was announced that the UK has not fallen into a technical recession. But that joy was short-lived when it was revealed that although the economy hasn't shrunk, it hasn't grown either. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
Put the tape in.
Yeah. Even if he looks closely, the Chancellor won't find evidence of growth in the latest data.
Stops.
Yeah. The economy shrank in December and stagnated in the last quarter of 2022. The smallest droplet of good news, that was just enough to prevent the UK entering a recession.
We are not out of the woods. Inflation is still much too high. That is causing pain for families up and down the country, which is why we need to stick to our plan to halve inflation. If we do that and play to our strengths in science and technology, we really can be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe.
After months of high energy costs and labour shortages driving up prices, a combination of snow, a Winter World Cup postponing Premier League games and public sector strikes left businesses like this struggling as consumers spread spending thin.
That strikes really impacted us, so we really have to close early on the day of strikes. So it's so hard for the small businesses, and I really hope there are going to be more government help. We are not even breaking even. There are losses every month I have to pay out of the pocket. So it does stress me, it does stress the staff.
The Chancellor believes research like this points to future prosperity. In the present, improved pay offers to halt the wave of industrial action are unlikely.
You're saying there is no more money, forget it, get back to work. There's no chance of an increased payoff.
It's not a no, it's saying we'll talk about absolutely anything except things that will dig in the very high inflation that is causing people to see the cost of their weekly shop go up and the value of their wages erode.
It's not just the public sector putting the squeeze on the Chancellor. He's under pressure to extend household energy support, and from business, desperate for incentives to invest. But with the economy flatlining and Britain's economic credibility still recovering, there's not much room for manoeuvre.
The Bank of England forecasts that recession has been delayed, not avoided, and with rail union the RMT rejecting pay offers, more disruption and economic damage seems likely. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Just want to bring you an update on the breaking news we brought you a little while ago, and that was of the riot outside a hotel that had been housing refugees on Merseyside in the area of Knowsley. There's now been a statement from the local MP, Sir George Howarth, and one of the lines in the statement, I'll go through it in a moment, he's saying that those demonstrating against refugees at this protest tonight do not represent this community. Police have said so far that there haven't been any injuries, but the full statement reads, I have referred an alleged incident posted on social media which has triggered a demonstration outside the Suites Hotel to Merseyside Police and Knowsley Council. Until the police have investigated the matter, it is too soon to jump to conclusions, and the effort on the part of some to inflame the situation is emphatically wrong. If an offence has been committed, the police should deal with it appropriately through due process. It goes on, in addition, the misinformation about the refugees being feather-bedded is untrue and intended to paint a picture that does not at all represent the facts. The people of Knowsley are not bigots and are welcoming to people escaping from some of the most dangerous places in the world in search of a place of safety. Those demonstrating against refugees at this protest tonight do not represent this community. We are not like that and overwhelmingly behave with sympathy and kindness to others, regardless of where they come from. And there's an addition, I believe, from the leader of Knowsley Council, just saying that we condemn the violence outside the Suites Hotel tonight. We call for calm and for all the community not to engage in any way in this violence and call on everyone concerned to show constraint. So that the very latest on that incident, first reported in that statement from Merseyside Police. We'll, of course, update you on the situation there in Knowsley as soon as there is more information to bring to you. In the meantime, the Olympics is one of the biggest sporting competitions in the world, including more than 200 teams. Now, a group of 35 countries have backed a ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes at the 2024 Games. Our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, reports.
Russians competing in sport, the latest battleground for Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian president addressing ministers and officials from 35 nations, hoping the message gets through to Olympic chiefs.
Representatives of the terrorist state have no place at sport and Olympic competitions. And it cannot be covered up with some pretended neutrality or white flag.
That is the plan from the IOC for Paris 2024, allowing athletes from Russia and war ally Belarus who haven't supported the war to compete as neutrals. Paris organisers and the French government aren't dissenting, but the mayor of Paris showed solidarity on a trip to Kyiv, saying she wants no Russian athletes in her city for the Olympics. The IOC is dismissive, insisting athletes should not face discrimination in sport due to their passports, while urging against a Ukrainian boycott. Throughout Ukraine, Russia's invasion has caused devastation across sport. 350 sports facilities have been destroyed. 220 athletes and coaches have been killed. 40,000 athletes have been forced abroad. And 140,000 promising young athletes have been left with no training and development centres. During the British-led summit, Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser backed Zelensky's demand for an Olympics without Russians and Belarusians. Those representing athletes worldwide are concerned Olympic leaders have been too lenient towards Russia for too long.
If they don't change their decision, I would suspect that there'll be athletes not turning up. And I think there'll be a lot of athletes that will stand up in support of Ukraine and refuse to go to these games if the IOC continues down this path.
The IOC is showing no sign of changing course, but allowing Russians at Paris 2024 is deepening divisions, and the prospect of boycotts is growing. Rob Harris, Sky News.